get some people coming on as we speak. Good morning, Francesca, the first one. Danius as well. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this Monday morning. We are going to leave it at 30 seconds, maybe a minute, so let everyone log on and say hello. Good morning, Dennis, Steph, Matt, Chelsea. It's a lot of people on here.
I was just going to ask you, actually, you're quite small on the screen. Is that correct, or should you be quite big?
No, I think because we have the presentation, Gianni, you yourself and me will be for us. I think it might be for everyone. We're sort of small in the screen. Whoever is speaking will take the sort of dominant screen, if you like. So, good morning, Sandy. Okay, so guys, we're gonna get started straight away. We're super excited with today's special guest, but let me just give you some housekeeping rules. So for everyone that joined us last week at the Defining Moments series, will know that we are doing it differently this time. We're going to do questions as we go along and as we have the conversation with Gianni. So you can see the bottom boxes at the bottom. You have a question mark. If you please put your questions in there, we will address those as we go along, but it's easier for us to see a question versus a comment. And then you have the comment box, which a lot of you are using at this moment in time. Good morning, Andy. He's one of them. He just used the square box. So Defining Moments series 2, or even episode 2, we have the fantastic Gianni Scimaci with us this morning. So Gianni, thank you first of all for taking the time to joining us today. I know there's a lot of people excited. Why don't you start with sharing with us briefly how your career has taken you from start to where you are today, and then we can pick into some of the defining moments we're going to cover today. But do you want to give us a brief summary for the crowd who might not know your story so far?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We're super excited to have you.
It's an honor to be here to do it. And I'd like to say hi to everybody who's joining. Thank you for all your kind messages and good mornings to everyone. Some familiar names. It's lovely to have everyone here. I'm going to just turn my volume down, I think, because I'm getting a feedback. That's all right. So just want to make sure. Yeah, I think everyone can hear. So somebody said it wasn't very loud, but I think we should be okay. So it's great to be here. And yeah, basically, I'm a third generation hairdresser. I started when I was very young because my parents and grandparents were hairdressers. And in a short synopsis, I started cutting hair when I was 10. And I then went on to working as a teenager in a salon on a Saturday as a Saturday boy, all the way through from sort of age 8 through till 16 when I then did my apprenticeship. And I was cutting hair on the salon floor doing men's hair.
And was that in your parents' salon?
It was, yeah. So I began working with my father in his barbershop. And then I went on to working with a friend of my father's, my mum's, who had quite a large unisex salon in a place called Lincoln, where I'm from. And I ended up working from the age of 12, working with him, a guy called Keith Reeve, a salon called Talking Heads. Fantastic salon, fantastic man. And he gave me a great deal of experience and opportunity and confidence at such a young age. And then I went on from there. I came to London and joined Sassoons, and I became their youngest ever creative director. And by the age of 21, I was directing a salon of 35 staff. Eldest being 92, which was a cloakroom lady, and the youngest being 16, which was the apprenticeship. And then I went from there. I worked 10 years at Sassoons, and then went from Sassoons through to freelance hairdressing. So I went into fashion, and I worked and traveled with a photographer called Tim Walker and various other photographers in fashion. Did part-time work in the salons, never left the salon behind the chair, but I would then left the industry really, rather than leaving. I didn't leave the salon, but I left the industry and went into fashion and did that for a few years. And then came back. My mum got very sick, which was a defining moment, which we can touch upon later. and went from there and decided to come back into the hair industry with all the experience and knowledge that I'd acquired, and then set up my I worked for a period of time alongside setting up my own education brand with Shiseido at a brand called Joico, and I was their global vision director for about 6 or 7 years, and traveled around the world with my education, using their platform and working with them, and then launched eventually my own education independently. And then I was approached by John Frieda, and then brought my education to the John Frieda brand and built the salon business from an education point of view, and built a structural teaching team. And that's kind of where I am today. I mean, I've left a lot out, but that's quite unusual for me to tell a short story.
Well, I remember, hearing your story previously, and I think most people who's ever met you in person will agree with me that your story is truly inspirational, and certainly we're going to dig into that today in some of those defining moments. Sure. I think one of the things majority of people have said to me, they had some form of contact or a connection with you through education, is your extreme kindness. I think you're one of the kindest people I ever come across in this industry, and you're uber talented. And I think your story that you just briefly shared with us, that connection you have with being a third generation hairdresser, is so powerful. I think it really comes through when you're telling your stories on stage, etc., or you're in front of a class. So one of the first things I wanted to share with everyone is we have a video clip of you, and this particular video clip we're going to share with everyone. I think we're in the range of 12, 13 and 14 years old. So that's going to be our first defining moment. But before you go on that, Gianni, let's play the video for everyone and show them what that looked like all that time. Let's see, Declan, are you on this? He is indeed. So let's have a look at this video.
I've noticed actually some people can't hear from the comments, so maybe there's
we do have this from time to time, Gianni, and it's a difficult one. It's often bandwidth, and depending on where people are located, and I can only imagine how many webinars there is, but I'm sure Declan is working on it. Do we have the video, Declan?
I'm actually getting an echo back as well, but I'll maybe try my headphones.
I'm going to turn mine down slightly. Okay, I know you're not getting the video just yet, so I'm going to let just have a brief look. Well, let's do this. Let's leave the video for one moment. It was interesting.
I was going to say, would you like to restart it again? Maybe it might reboot the system.
Right, just bear with me. I'm actually not in control of the video, so let's do this. Okay. Let's see if Declan can either do something in regards to the video. If not, I'm just going to move on to the next one, and we can come back to that very moment in time. So Declan, if you can change it to the next picture, and we can come back to that, Gianni. We apologize. Sure. We're going to try to get this video sorted and come back to that. But let's look at this, which will be our second defining moment, if you like. This is a beautiful picture. This is you when you're 19 years old with Vidal. Tell us more about that. What led you to that moment in time?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to take these out. Sorry. Just, there we go. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to turn my volume right down because that's better. So yeah, this is me and Vidal. I was 19 years old when this picture was taken. And I was basically, this was at a fashion show we were doing, and there were haircuts in the show, and Vidal at that point, just this one here, yeah. At this point, I built a relationship with Vidal outside of the company because he didn't own the company anymore. And he was very much a part of the sponsorship of Fashion Week, because at the time his name was bought by Procter and Gamble, and they were sponsoring Fashion Week. So he was the figurehead coming in, and he had spotted the hair, and he had made a beeline backstage where we were preparing, and had asked who had done this particular model's hair, and it was mine. So he took her, yeah. So he said he made a real beeline for it. He sat her down and he wanted to look at the hair, and all the cameras were crowding in. And I mean, I think the look on my face is kind of absolute bewilderment. And it was a big defining moment for me. That the reason why was that he decided to check the haircut, and while he was doing it, he was getting her to swing her hair. And I think you can see in the small inset picture that you can see the model swinging her hair.
Yes, yeah.
And he essentially was very complimentary about the model and the haircut and what I'd done in front of everybody and the cameras. And of course, somebody caught it on film, which was fantastic. And he and I had actually met about a year before that when I first moved to London. And that kind of ties in with the defining moment for me moving to London. I know that we've got some imagery from before this, but we can go back afterwards. It's not a problem. Sure. Once, Declan's, happy with it. But basically, I'd met Vidal through writing to him. And I built a relationship through letters. And originally, when I first moved to London, I went to Fashion Week. I had just become an apprentice, a Vardra, which is a form of training that you do where you've been an apprentice, and you should have at least 4 years experience as a salon stylist. And then you go and join Vidal Sassoon, and they kind of fast track your training. So you don't do 3 years, you do it in 6 months, basically, every day. And I hadn't had the 4 years, but because I had such a head start, they decided to take me on. And I decided to turn up after 2 weeks at London Fashion Week with my Vidal Sassoon kit bag, which was like a little leather bag that everybody had, and essentially bullshitted my way into Fashion Week with this little bag, and just said to the big bodyguard at the front, I'm late, I'm part of the Vidal Sassoon team, and he didn't realize, so he let me through. And then had another bodyguard who I said the same thing, and then I got into the tent, and then there was a very sophisticated looking PR woman, and I thought, she's not going to fall for this. She looks far too sharp. And so she took one look at me, and she could see I was a fish out of water, because I was really not sure where I was. I was 18, I've been in London for 2.5 weeks. This dream of meeting Vidal was something that had been burning inside of me from a very, very young age. And I was in a situation where I was about to meet my idol, my hero. And I have to be honest, I was so numb with emotion, because I was so excited, but it was so overwhelming. I became almost numb, and I was obviously trying to negotiate my position. So this lady said, can I help you? Which is another word where the words basically get out. and I just said, she said, what, how can I help you? And I just then said, well, I'm here. And I thought, she's not going to fall for it. So I told her the truth. And I said, I've come to meet Vidal. I know he's here somewhere, but it's been a lot. And I just gave her a 30-second ramble of what he meant to me. And she said to me, take a seat over here. And it was actually, I was so lucky. I could have gone in different doors. Sometimes things are meant to be, it was the press tent. I could have gone into different tents. I didn't even know what a press tent was. And she was one of the head press officers. And he was having his dinner. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening. He was having food in the room that was behind where she was talking to me. I had no idea. He could have been anywhere. He might not even been there. And she said, wait here. And she went into the room. I didn't know. I just thought, well, this is better than being thrown out. And she went into the room. She came back out, and she said, he's in there at the moment. And of course, I started shaking when I knew he was about 15 meters away from me through a wall, and a temporary wall at that. I couldn't believe it. So she said, he'll be with you in 10 minutes. Well, I couldn't believe this. I was listening to this. And so 10 minutes it seemed like an hour and, or longer. And I look back at it now, and I do can't believe, the audacity that I had, but that wall wouldn't have stopped me. I was so focused about doing it, and I can't explain it. I can't explain. I do look back as an adult now, because I really wasn't that much of an adult at 18 at all. And I was living in a hostel And I just remember it was like I was on a mission. I didn't feel it was something I had to do. It was like inside of me. And so eventually I got invited in, and I walked in, and he was having his dinner with Ronnie, that's his wife. And I sat next to him, and he said, what fashion shows have you come to see? And I went bright red, because I didn't even know what a fashion show was. I've got to be honest. And I said, "Oh, I've just come to see you. I haven't come to see a fashion show." And he sat me down, and he had a program, and he wrote a beautiful message to my dad, because I told him briefly about I was a third generation. My dad was a barber, and my mum, and he wrote this message, and then we got chatting.
Can you remember what that message was?
Yes, I can. Yeah, he wrote to my dad, whose name's Nudjo. He said to Nudjo, he said, "A pleasure to meet your son, a chip off the old block." And I couldn't believe that I was watching him write it, and I couldn't believe he was writing something, but then he was writing to my dad, because he asked for my dad's name. And then he was saying something nice about me, so it was quite amazing. And I have to say, it was probably one of the most defining moments of my life, because he then said to me, we got chatting a little bit, and I think he could just sense the passion that I had. He must have done, because then he then said to me, he then said, "Well, come with me." And I got up with him and left. I didn't know where we were going. He took me down this sort of, him and Ronnie and a few bodyguards and press officers and whatever. And we went down these dark curtains, and we came out into a fashion show. And he sat on the front row, and I sat behind him, between him and Ronnie on the second row. They made me a chair, and it was the Alexander McQueen show. And I didn't know who Alexander McQueen was. But since that moment, I wrote to him. I did my final test presentation at Vidal, and I sent it to him with an explanation and a big, I gave him the full presentation package and a thank you letter. And he wrote back to me, and we became basically pen pals. And my mum has some of the letters that he wrote to me at home, And so by the time we get to this picture here, we knew each other, but not through work, but through letters. But he didn't know I'd done this haircut to begin with. I don't think he would have known. I never knew, actually, but he made a beeline for it anyway. And then he saw me and then made this big deal. So I never forget leaving Fashion Week. I nearly got run over by a bus in South Kensington because I was in such a daze. And I'm going back to the hostel where I was living. And of course, it was full of, I was sharing a shoebox room with a French guy. I never forget. And there was all these people there. They knew me by this point, but say hello, because we'd all been there for the beginning of the term. They were all students at uni or wherever they were. And I remember thinking, I can't begin to explain what I've just done, because they don't know who Vidal is. They, one or two might have known the name, but they're not hairdressers. But they could see I was quite profoundly moved as I walked into the hostel. I'll never forget that. And that became this. So that connection with Vidal was pivotal and defining for me.
Sure.
He taught me grace. He taught me humility. He taught me. I think, if I'm honest, I think I was 18, so I was a sponge, but I was who I was, and I am who I am. I think we all are. But he obviously saw something in me that I hadn't recognized in myself, and I think the fact that he was reinforcing some of the things that were in me gave me beyond concrete confidence to be who I am, and I'll be forever grateful for that. So this moment here was a huge moment for me.
It's a beautiful story, and I have to be honest with you, I'm listening to you, and I may not even caught all the questions, so I will go back and have a look if I missed anything. But tell me this, first of all, the video that we were going to start with is ready to go, so we're going to go back to that, Gianni.
Sure.
But, so let me ask you this, when you moved to London then, was it always a focus for you? Was your goal always to make it big, so to speak? Did you have a big vision for yourself? Did you have a large goal for you to achieve? Was that from the start when you moved to London, or?
Yeah, it was. To be honest with you, it was. And my goal from probably like 10, 11 years old was to join Sassoons, and basically to join Sassoons and become Sassoon stylist. To me, at such a young age, even then, it was almost like being part of the SAS, you know, which I always think is quite interesting because it's the first three letters of his surname. And it was just this highly trained, like the best of the best environment at that stage in my head.
Sure.
And then when I joined the company, of course, I got exposed to a hierarchy, you know, and I think from a young age, I'd always wanted to be there, and it was like a destiny for me, and a destiny to meet Vidal. I mean, it was most young, I'm being very generic here, but most young boys kind of dream of lifting the World Cup, or, you know, something like that, or playing a rock gig or whatever. You know, I'm being very generic, and girls as well, actually, for that matter. But, you know, I had this dream and this image of kind of connecting and being with Vidal and having this one-on-one time with him. And when I joined Sassoons, yeah, it was very clear I wanted to go. I wanted to become, I suppose, the international creative director of the company, which I've never really had sort of shared that before, but that was my aspiration. And before I joined, when I came to London, I was on a mission. I mean, I didn't care about anything but hair and being the best at what I could be. And I think when I joined the company and then saw what the opportunities were, that's where I went. So I was, very driven, unhealthily, probably, if I'm honest, at that age. You know, if I look back, it's quite unhealthy. I mean, I would have died for it, you know, really. I really would. And a lot of people who work with me, I was very different to a lot of the people around me, and even they were quite driven, but I was sort of on a real mission.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And I think these things are really important. And on Friday, we had Debbie on talking about her defining moments. And one of the things that came up, which I'm sure will be true to you, is when you have that vision and that aspiration, there is always an element of sacrifices you have to do. Tell me some of your sacrifices in that beginning part. I'm sure you still have them, of course you do. But in that beginning part, as a young stylist coming to London, having these aspirations, what kind of sacrifices, if you now look back, did you have to do to achieve what you ultimately achieved?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny, if I'm being really honest. At the time, it didn't seem like a sacrifice because. Sure. I mean, it was huge. When I look back at it now, I can see what I sacrificed. But I essentially sacrificed part of my childhood. I wouldn't change it, and I would do it a million times over. I think my aspiration was to achieve some form of greatness, I suppose, to be the best I could be. I'm not saying I am, but the best I could be. And I think to have balance in your life and achieve something that's of something that's further than most can reach, I think it doesn't really work. I think you have to have an imbalance there. You have to dedicate a certain amount of time and emotional, mental, physical energy into something to achieve a certain level. And of course, that comes at sacrifice of the thing. So to answer your question directly, I mean, you know, while my friends were playing football, you know, on a Saturday and playing Sunday league and Saturday football and going into town, I'm talking 13, 14 years old. I was scrubbing stairs with bleach in my hand and then doing a clippers back and sides and looking and watching and, you know, going out for coffees for stylists and, you know, watering false plants that used to wind me up and go for garlic chewing gum and get a long wait, you know, all that. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So it didn't, I mean, I could go through a list of I sacrificed time with my family. You know, I missed a lot of things. I did not have a conventional, not upbringing from necessarily from my parents, but an upbringing from an adult upbringing from teenagers onwards.
Yeah, you know, the social aspect that maybe. I said it's so you. I guess what you're saying is you didn't have it conventionally in terms of the social aspect of being a teenager, in terms of doing those standard things like football, etc., on weekends, and those were things you have to leave behind.
That's right. I was very much left. I left all that behind. Yeah, and even when I came to London, all my colleagues were going out partying, and you know, I was at home working out my next haircut, you know, and my next presentation. So, and model hunting, you know, I could hours and hours trawling the streets looking for models, you know, where others were going out. So, yeah, there was a lot of sacrifice for sure. But it didn't feel that way. It was just because I wanted to do it. But you know, looking back, there were the sorts of things that went.
Yeah, no, I understood. And it actually leads us nicely to go take that step back, because talking about this video, so definitely if we could get the video up, we would do to start with. So let's take a moment and look at this video when Gianni is 12, 13, 14 years old. So if you want to click play, please, Declan.
So it's just a short clip there.
There is a short clip. So talk us through some of what we you saw on that video. What was sort of the locations? What was the context of some of these shows and haircuts that you did?
Yeah, so I was, as I say, I think the first one when I was about 13, actually. I was just 13, and some went into when I was 14. I worked for this man called Keith Reeve, and he used to do shows, I think on behalf of Weller, actually. And he went around the county of Lincolnshire, which is where I'm from. So I went from village halls where you maybe have 30, 40 hairdressers to larger venues where there's maybe 100, 150. And he would take me with him doing these shows with the team. So some of that you saw, there was the team, and then they would eventually give me my own little podium, my own stage where I do my own men's hair. I mean, you have to put that into context in the sense that that footage was taken by my dad. You know, he would film everything, and then of course I'd go home and watch it and want to watch it and see how I sounded, how I looked, not necessarily from a vain point of view, but how the haircut looks and how could I be better. You know, I hear racing drivers do this when they watch their Formula One, they rewatch what they could do better, and that's kind of what I suppose I was doing. I didn't know that at the time. I was just, all I wanted to do was do more of it and be better. I think one of the clips in there was me at school. You know, I was on stage cutting one of the teachers at school at a school conference thing that we did. So there were very early days of me doing shows. I mean, it's very unusual, I think. I have not, you know, to do shows at 13 and 14 and be given a platform and a public voice and express yourself, both from I suppose an educational point of view, but also from a creative perspective. That was invaluable. And you know, I know I'm further enough in my career now to know how much, you know, Keith gave me. That's my boss, Keith Reeve. You know, he gave me the opportunity, and I would come off stage. You know, so you can see that person that you saw cutting hair in that video clip that was 30 seconds long or whatever. That was the young boy cutting hair on a salon floor, charging £3.50 on a Saturday. So, you know, to give you the context, you know, I think he thought, well, if he's going on stage cutting hair for me in a show, he can do it in the salon. And it was, you know, invaluable. You know, I'm so grateful because, you know, to have that confidence and experience, you don't know fear at 13, 14. You don't know it. You just do it. That can never be, you know, you can't buy that. I'm very lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely. Let me ask you this before we move on to the next defining moment for you. When you look at where you are today and in your experience with shows and doing hair behind the chair, how do you see that that link, if you like? Because I sometimes feel that it almost seen as two separate things. Where do you see the benefits from doing stage hair and bringing that back behind the chair in a salon? What sort of have you learned between the two, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sure. Is that for me personally or for the audience?
Well, both for you and maybe some advice that you can give, because of course you often see stylists taking almost one route rather than the other. You know, if you are a sort of a show hairdresser or you strictly behind the chair. But what have you learned from stage that you can take behind the chair and deal with your clients?
Oh, that's a great question. From my personal perspective, I don't see a difference. Now there are different genres of hairdressers. You have competition hairdressers, show hairdressers, you know, fashion, salon, theatre, you know, TV, all the whole thing. They're all very different skill sets. But what I've always tried to do is I've always tried to apply myself with the same philosophy and the same approach, whatever I do. So if I'm on stage, the first thing I want to know when I'm asked to do a show is who is paying the ticket for me to be able to do that. who are the people, where are they from, and what are their expectations. If people, people pay really, their hard-earned money and their time to come and see a show, for me, I'm there to serve them. It's as important for me that I see myself in them as they see themselves in me when I'm on stage. And I'm very, very strong about that. I have a huge amount of respect for the audience, just like I would a client paying to come in and sit in my chair. Even more so in a way. I can't really compare how much respect I have for each party, but you've got 100, 200 people paying to come and to see you do something. I want them to walk away with value, and I want them to feel that they can translate. There may be a part of the show that's inspiration that you're not going to put into Mrs. Smith on Tuesday morning, but the idea behind that would be mixed with my role really when I'm on stage is for people to see something in themselves that they may not have seen, and that they can aspire to do something, because if I can do it, they can definitely do it. And so I'm a stickler. I'll give you a little example about that. I went to where did I go? Taipei, on a show, and it was a huge show, really big show. And I took somebody with me who was a very experienced hairdresser as a sort of an assistant to train them on how to do shows. And there was a huge set, huge stage, and I do this thing. I don't get changed until the very last minute when I do a show. I've always been like that. And the reason being is that what I do is I sit in my jeans and my t-shirt, whatever I'm prepping in, and I sit in the audience often right before the show's going to start, like 10 minutes before. Because for me, and no one will know who I am. I just go incognito and sit in the middle of the audience, and I want to feel who the audience are and where they're at, because emotionally I need to engage with them. And so I need to understand what it's like sitting in the audience. So when I'm on stage, I can connect better. And so it's I do that right at the last minute, and then I get changed and then I go on. And when I was in Taipei, I had this man with me, Ian, really lovely guy, Ian. And he was so nervous, and I wouldn't let him get changed. And I said, you're going to come and watch, you're going to come and do this. And so I said, you need to go in your jeans. Don't want anyone to think, who we are. Like they're not. You don't want people to recognize who you are. You just want to be with everybody else, blend in. You can just sense the situation. Otherwise, if people realize it's you, you're not going to feel the vibe. And I'll never forget, we sat down in the middle of about 500 in Taipei, and he looked at me and he said, "But we're the only Caucasian people here." And I was like, "Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Let's get up. Let's go quick." So I thought, it didn't work out the way I expected. But yeah, so for me, it's, if someone's paying to come see me do a show, I want to be doing something on stage, a large percentage of it, that, I would be doing in the salon, because, I have to practice what I preach. I have a huge respect for salon. For me, I'm a salon hairdresser. That's where I'm from, and I'll always be from there. So for me, I'm hugely passionate about salon hairdressers developing themselves.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. It's a great answer, and I'm gonna move us forward. I'm listening to you, and I said it was a risk I might miss questions, and I'm scanning it as we go along. But I'm so into your stories. I think it's mesmerizing listening to you, Gianni. But I'm gonna crack on with the next picture here. We have the Fanny, and I quite like that this model is Swedish, but don't let me speak about this image. Why don't you talk us through this? I think this is a beautiful picture, and why don't you tell us more about this moment?
Well, basically, long story short, while I was working since I was a young art director by this point, creative director, 22, I think, 21, 22. And I used to consult. I'll give you a short version of the story just for time, but I used to consult for Models One, who was a big model agency in London, and still are. And I used to look after all their new faces, and then we'd negotiate what we would do with the hair. And one day they just sent me a model in and said, "We got this Swedish girl from Sweden. We don't know what to do with her. You just tell us what you think." They'd never said that to me before. And I said, "Send her in." I was expecting Claudia Schiffer, this Swedish blonde bombshell, And she walks in, she's 5'5", looks like a scruffy tomboy with parachute trousers. And I'm like, this can't be the girl, And she had a real attitude. Now, when I say attitude, I'm careful, because there's connotations to that word, and it's quite vague, but she had a very strong confident outlook and didn't care much about anyone's opinion. I got that feeling from her. Sure. And I could see how I work with three ways. I discover, people, create, or evolve. So if I discover someone, it's about understanding who they think they are. So it's my job, like most hairdressers, to work out who the client thinks they are, so you can connect and get onto their level. And when the client realizes that you understand who they are, they feel comfortable. Now that's a kind of basic foundational skill that most hairdressers should acquire. Creating a character, that's discovering a character. Creating a character is about creating something that's nothing to do with the person. It's more fashion, and you're creating an outside character for the shoot. And then evolving a character is where you've really go back to discovering. You've got to discover someone, understand who they are, to then reframe them and put them into and give them an idea of who you think they can be. Now, it often can overlap. That's their frame of who they think they are, but your frame can be slightly further over, and you're developing them, evolving them. I think that's what we should bring to the table as hairdressers, because it's where the real value lies. And I won't get too deep into that on this conversation, but with her, I discovered and evolved her immediately. I could see her, I could get on her level, and I could see what she could be. And because I could see that she was ready emotionally to let me take her there, I did it. I cut her hair, shaved it off at the back and sides, left front long and like a mullet at the back. Now, this is nearly 20 years old in 2000, and this is 2001. And so it's coming up for the 20th anniversary. And you've got to remember, back then, nobody had that type of, very few people had that kind of hair. I mean, now hair, everything goes. But back then, it really wasn't like that. And long story short, she left the salon, and I rang the agency the following day saying, what did you think? Because they didn't ring me back, and I was a bit worried. And they said, well, we haven't seen her. And I said, well, she was on her way to you at 4:00 last night. And they said, well, no, she went for a drink, and the photographer saw her in the bar and booked her for the Gap campaign. And she's now in New York tomorrow shooting Gap. So whatever you've done, we love it, but we haven't seen it. And the next thing, it blew up. And I had this, and she did Gucci, TSE Cashmere, Jill Sander, Gap, as I mentioned. And it basically dominated the season. That all the fashion shows changed their look for her. She went to New York, and all the models that she was living with all had her haircut. They all copied it, because she became very wealthy very quickly. And basically, I had the Sunday Times, Evening Standard, and the world's press came to my door. And this picture that you see is this was the cover shoot for the Sunday Times, and this is me and her. And I remember that they didn't want her, they wanted me and her, but the photographer couldn't get a decent shot because it looked a little bit cliche with being a hairdresser and a pair of scissors in my hand. And in between shots, she was quite a naughty girl. She was kind of always messing about, very spirited. And to kind of like play with her in between pictures, I just swept her on her feet, almost like I had a rose in my hand, that's my green comb. It's in my mouth. And the photographer assistant took a Polaroid while the photographer took a Polaroid while the photographer assistant was changing the film. And that tells you how long ago it was. There's no digital. And the Polaroid was like a perfect shape, symmetry of this look. So he spent the next 3 hours trying to recreate it, and I had a bad back by the end of it. But this haircut changed my life. It changed. This is probably one of the most defining moments of my life, and that was from this.
It's a fantastic story, and the picture itself with you two there, I just think is absolutely extraordinary. Let me just have a quick look so I'm not missing out on anything. I love it, and I do know we have a video. So let me just double check with Declan so we don't run into the same as last time. We have a video here.
Oh, yeah. I think this is. Sorry, I was going to say. I think this is this is just a small snippet of the global press that I had. I think some of it's US, some of it's UK, and some of it's in Asia.
Fantastic. So Declan, hit play, please.
Long hair's sort of moving out now and giving people a bit more freedom in their lives. It's very exciting. It started a new generation of haircuts, and all the models now, you look in all the fashion magazines, they've all gone for the very short haircut.
Yep, the fanny is short, really short, kind of funky, but before you freak out, relax. London fashion critics say long hair is so over. Chopped, cropped hair is in. Check out the European runways, too, from Karl Lagerfeld Chanel to Galliano's Dior. Notice the hip haircuts on the catwalk. They're mainly short. Even Aussie actress Kate Blanchett cut off her locks. Here she is with a high voltage version on W's glossy cover.
Usually I take about an hour to achieve that look.
To get the fanny, Gianni cuts the bangs to mid-eye level. The sides are short, the top is long in sections, and the back tapers to a point at the nape.
You've got like an L-shaped section on one side and a much thicker section through the other.
Underneath are large asymmetrical crop sections, creating sort of an off-kilter mohawk. Gianni says the fanny can look absolutely kittenish or as edgy as you want it to be. No rules, no limits.
Oh, it's a fantastic video, and the impact of that haircut alone must feel such a, well, you tell me, how does that feel to know that looking back almost 20 years ago, that particular haircut has such a tremendous impact on the fashion world?
It was something that it's funny, I didn't expect to be catapulted in any shape or form in that way, but I think that I was so focused on where I wanted to get to, and it was, to be honest, I wasn't prepared. I mean, it just catapulted me in, and some of that footage was, in California I got invited out to the Oscars. I got flown to New York. I went to Asia. Vidal wrote to me personally, then he invited me to his home, which we can talk about in a moment, all based on this. And he was very complimentary about how it reminded him of some of the things that he'd done in the past. And so, at 22 years old, 22, 23 years old, it was just something that I think was, I look back at it, I think it taught me a great lesson. There's a picture, I think, coming up. I think we may have a picture on Sunset Boulevard of the haircut. Yeah. This is on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, and you can see behind the picture of Fanny. I called the haircut the Fanny. It was my dad who he said to me, "You're going to have to name it," and he goes, "You should call it the Fanny, after her." Of course, that grabbed headlines here, and of course in America it means something different as well. So it was something that it was my dad who actually got me to do that. But I think what it taught me most importantly was, you can see a global brand. I mean, there's nothing more global than Gap, and they are selling their clothes from a haircut. There's a collar in that picture. The size of that building is huge. You can't quite see the perspective, but I mean, it's absolutely massive. And it's about 200 yards away from me in the picture. But this picture always reminds me, and what it taught me was, I thought the value of what we bring to society as hairdressers. At 23, I learned that the value of a haircut, the power of a haircut, not because I did it, but because it can be so powerful that it can change the world from a fashion perspective. It can change the fashion world. It can change how people are influenced. And the Gap clearly thought it was so influential, they take a picture of it and sell the clothes off the back of it. So that's the lesson it taught me.
I mean, it's
the power of what we do.
Absolutely. It's remarkable that Gap at that point would use a haircut to tell their story about clothes. I mean, it's truly amazing. I know we had a question here from Andy who named it the Fanny. I think you answered that. And of course, the model's name was Fanny, and she was a Swedish model. Which brings us on to the next image with you and Vidal. And this is in Los Angeles. Talk us through this, Gianni, please.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I know that for some people watching, they've seen a presentation where some of these pictures are featured when we did a previous event together. But what I would like to do is just talk a bit more behind this picture that I didn't before. This is the same time as when I did Fanny's hair, and he invited me out. This is his favorite place in Beverly Hills, where we had breakfast, and he drove me in his open top Jag through Beverly Hills with the palm trees up to his private residence, and I stayed with him. And it was probably the most, apart from on a professional level, it's probably the most the greatest experience and defining moment from a professional point of view. I think what Vidal did on that day was he taught me. He was so generous, and he taught me things that I had not realized at the time that he was teaching me. He taught me he was explaining how Cary Grant had taught him how to handle people in public, and he was giving me this information at 23 years old about how you handle people, how you conduct yourself. He reinforced the belief that you got to, let's be honest, I'm from Lincoln. I'm the son of two hairdressers and a third generation hairdresser. I'm not being I come from a humble background. I just love what I do. I'm not particularly special. So for me, it was something that to have someone like him, who was God to me, reinforce, have that time, that one-to-one time, and give me the confidence that he did. It was quite spiritual, if I'm honest. It was something beyond confidence. It was like a very strong sense of, what I could do. And it wasn't, there was never overconfidence. It was just a deep-seated level of something that he gave to me, which I'm forever grateful for.
It's just so interesting sitting here listening to you. I do have a question that's come up from these haircuts. So Matt is asking, first of all, he loves hearing your story again. He's heard your story before.
Hi, Matt.
He's actually been in when you did Passion Fair. It was at Business Counts, and they done the cutting workshop they were doing then. But he's asking, how can we as an industry bring back the short hair trend and move people away from the long hair syndrome?
It's a great question. Thanks, Matt. Great to hear from you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. I think, it comes down to how we are as hairdressers. And, there's a lot of talk about trends and what people's expectations are with social media and what people see. But if we conduct our connection with clients in a certain way, we will get to a deeper, less superficial place about what will give them greater value to their lives. And that doesn't mean a short haircut on everybody, by the way. But what I found is that when if you walk into a shop, I think we're in a culture right now, right? We're oversaturated with choice. So years ago, if you walked into a shop and you had 4 pairs of jeans to pick from, you pick one because they're the best ones out of the 4. You walk out and you're happy. Now you've got 30 pairs of jeans to pick from. You pick one and you walk out, and what you think is, oh, I think I missed out on the other one. And that choice paralyzes us. And ironically, the more choice we have, the more we lose ourselves. And it's in a way, it's mathematics. You've got 25% of picking yourself when you've got 4, and you've got 30. I won't do the math, but you've got a lot more. You're in a situation where people they feel insecure sometimes with their own identity, that they have to pick on something to superficial, that they want to feel that they're going to be that person in the picture. There's nothing wrong with a photograph, but I think if hairdressers can go deeper, and we can not just deal with the superficial aesthetic level, but try to understand and connect on a more emotional level with the client, I think we can start to understand how we can reframe them. And I often think that our work would be I'm talking generally as an industry, our work would be a very different output to what it is right now. I think as an industry, we're far more led by the instant image that clients come in with, rather than investing that emotional energy into, and a lot of hairdressers do this, but I'm just looking in a bigger picture to answer Matt's question. I think that's how we will then get people to evolve who they are as people, because we're all individual. We're not all long hair, or we're not all balayage, or there's nothing wrong with this kind of hair at all. I think it's fantastic for some people, but I think there are a lot of people with hair, just as there is people with short hair that maybe longer hair would work. But it's really about bringing, I think the hair, years ago, people were much more, a haircut is permanent. It's a haircut is a commitment. It can't be changed quite as easily as other options. And I think that's where we need to bring people emotionally back into getting to celebrate who they are. Oh, I've lost you there, Daniel. I still can't hear you. Sorry. Can you hear me? I've lost a little bit of connection with you. I can hear myself, but I can't hear you. I'll continue anyway, if that helps, just while you're getting the sound back. Maybe we could flick to the next image. I was hoping that answered Matt's question. Hopefully it did anyway. But I know there's a little problem with Daniel's, I think maybe his audio, so I'll continue just to keep the conversation rolling. This particular image is basically an image I did for ID magazine. It was a homage to my grandfather. But the reason why this was a defining moment was the fact that I decided to pick 8 boys off the street and give them haircuts in memory of my grandfather. And I decided to take it to ID magazine. And I was talking to Debbie about this chat that we're going to have today about defining moments. And often a defining moment, it can be glorious, but it doesn't have to, not all defining moments are around success and glory. And actually, for me, this particular one was suppose in a way, it was a lot more about bravery.
Can you hear me, Gianni? Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I've got you back.
That's fine. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah.
I could hear you. Yes, carry on. I didn't want to interrupt. Just let you know I'm back.
Thank you. No, because I didn't know if I could hear you. That's good. So basically, this is kind of, for me, it was about going into a magazine called ID, who they'd never heard of me, quite a well-known, famous street magazine, and basically saying, I've got this project, would you publish it? And if I did it, and I look back and think, there's a lot more to this story. I'll cut it short, but there was a lot of reasons why they wouldn't shoot it. They said, no, thank you. We've got people like Eugene Suleiman, very famous fashion hairdresser, and Guido Palau. They've all submitted pictures of their work, so we don't have room, but thank you anyway. And they sort of said, thank you, but no, thank you. And I sweated blood, guts, everything for this project for many months. And right at the last minute to be told, thank you, but no, thank you. I thought, I'm going to shoot this anyway. And I did. So I shot it and spent all my money and did everything with nowhere to publish it. But then when I had it, I just thought, I'm going to give it back to the mass and for their feedback. And long story short, Terry Jones, who owned the magazine, saw it and then published it because he loved it. And the moral of this story for me, and why it's a defining moment, was the fact that this changed my life again, because from this shoot, Tim Walker, who's a very well-known fashion photographer, saw this shoot and basically approached me. He would never have known who I was had it not been for that. And then my life took a different turn into fashion. And that just taught me that, to have the bravery and don't take no for an answer. Sometimes when, I remember crying to my mum on the phone. I've never told anyone that before. I mean, I did this shoot and one of the models pulled out, and then of course the magazine said they weren't going to publish it. And I remember sitting in Whiteley Shopping Centre in Bayswater about 9 o'clock at night, spent, and I was on the phone to my mum and I started crying. I was like, I can't believe this project. And my grandfather, my mum's dad, was a boxer, and in the war he was an amateur boxer, but he was a champion boxer, and he used to watch boxing with me. And there was a boxer called Prince Nazim. I don't know if anybody knows who Prince Nazim was, but he was a very flash boxer when I was a young boy. Yeah. And my granddad, I used to love him because he used to do backflips, and he never, he would be so cocky in the ring, and he'd wear pink shorts and, move around. And my granddad was never impressed. And I said, Granddad, how can you not be impressed? He's a champion. No one can touch him, And he said to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, no one is a champion until I see them get back off the canvas and then win. And that's always stuck with me, that a true champion, it's not about winning, it's how you come back to win. That's where the champion bit comes. And it's so interesting because Prince Nazim never got hit because he had a quick technique. But then when he did get hit, he lost the plot. And I have to say, I think he's in prison now. I mean, I loved him, but I think he had problems outside the ring. But it just reinforced my granddad's advice. And I always remember that whenever I felt down, I thought, get up. I think that if you fall down in life, my advice is try to fall on your back, because if you can look up, you can get up.
Oh, that's really profound, and it's really interesting. I think it's very timely if you consider where we are at this moment in time and what's currently happening. And it's very clear to me that a lot of people that has achieved a certain level of success, however you would determine it, like yourself, Debbie was very much on a similar point last week. She said it's not what you do when times are going good, it's how you act and behave when times are good, you know, when it's not good times, when it's tough times. I love that advice. I think it's so profound. I think it's so important, and certainly timely if we consider where we are at this moment in time. Sounds like a great guy, your granddad, and giving that kind of advice. There was a question before you lost me, Gianni, that I didn't want to forget. Danielle was asking, she was 8 years old when she decided to be a hairdresser, and she's asking, what time did you decide? Can you remember a specific time where you decided, I want to be a hairdresser, and was your parents and grandparents the influence of that decision?
So thank you, Daniel. That's a great question, and amazing that you're 8 years old. That's fantastic.
No, she isn't 8. She was 8 when she decided.
My earliest memory of doing hair was blow drying my brother's hair when he got out of the shower, and I would have been about 5. Now, I can't say at 5 I wanted to be a hairdresser. I think I was just copying what I saw my dad do, like most boys do. If they have, they have their father, if they're lucky enough. Not everybody has a father, but I was lucky enough to be able to watch him, and my mum saw that, because she used to blow dry her hair every morning, and so I took a hairdryer. I think I was 7, nearly 8, when I started being a Saturday boy with my dad, and I was taken with it. So I think to answer the question, did my parents, were they influential? They were very, but I think they were very worried that they'd over-influenced me, and at one point they tried to stop me being a hairdresser. Because I think they thought, well, maybe we've over influenced him. They didn't push me, but I was very strong. That's when I gave up football. I used to play football a lot, and then I said, no, I want to work on a Saturday. I think that's when they realised. So I was very privileged that I've had family there to back me up. Of course, they understood it, but I think that I think I was still very driven personally, but I think it's that whole thing of nature nurture, isn't it? It's a difficult one to define, but I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, certainly does. And I just want to clarify, I think I put the question to you a bit strangely. Danielle is not 8, but she was 8 when she decided. She's
yes. Yeah.
I don't know how old she is, but I know she's older than 8 because I have met her. Thank you for that. So which leads us to the last moment here, this beautiful cover on Vogue. Tell us the story about this, Gianni, and what led to this moment.
So thank you. Yeah, this is a defining moment. Essentially, Tim Walker, the photographer who spotted the work I did in the magazine that I've just showed you, the men's shoot. He's a very well-known, famous photographer who has just done a big exhibition in the V&A. And I worked with him for many years, and this was the front cover of British Vogue, done in 2006. And I'll tell you why it was a defining moment. Sorry, I apologise. It was done in 2005.
Okay.
And it was done in June. And I can tell you, we were in Essex, and we were shooting on this beautiful old farm. And this is Stella Tennant. It's a supermodel. They'd asked Kate Phelan, the director of British Vogue, had asked if I'd come and cut her hair for the shoot. So for me to have a haircut on the front of British Vogue and do hair was a huge defining moment for me from a career perspective. And just as I was doing a hair on the Winnebago, which is the little bus that we were preparing in, the bombs went off in London on a bus that was near Russell Square. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, we do.
And that came through on the radio as I'm doing a hair for the front cut. Literally, I'm doing a hair, and they're waiting for me to go on set, and that came through the radio. And I suppose it was defining for obviously many reasons, but it did put it into perspective that, life is more important than the front cover of British Vogue. So suddenly the anxiety and stress of doing the front cover went. And don't get me wrong, my thoughts were immediately with all the people suffering in that terrible atrocity. But it did make me put in perspective that although I was about to reach a career high where it stood in life, and just to bring it back down to how important health is, as versus everything else around us. And so there was a juxtaposition it was a bittersweet situation for me. But from a career point of view, it was something that will always be with me, and I can rest. I could rest a little bit easier after that. I was never wanting to be a full-on fashion hairdresser from the beginning, but the fact that I managed to achieve that goal was defining for me. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you that if the front cover of Vogue was ever part of that vision and goal, or is there something that sort of just naturally happened and you're happy that it happened, or did you think about, I would love to have that front cover? Did that come into your thought process at any point?
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest, especially for yourself and all the people listening in. And you haven't asked me this question yet, but you may be going to. But I was very driven, as I said in my early years, about being sassoons and reaching the climax there. And I didn't choose to go into fashion; it kind of found me, as I mentioned in my story. And when I got into fashion, if I'm honest, I got slightly disillusioned. And I lost the top of the mountain. It was very clear the top of the mountain for me from the age of 7 or 8, like we spoke about. And suddenly I'm on another mountain, and I'm thinking, do I like the look at the top of that mountain? Because I've been looking at the top of that one, and I got not at the top, but I got as close as I wanted to, and I've just jumped. And for the first time in my life, I became a bit confused. Because I thought, if you're going to embrace something, and I would say this to everybody, if you're going to embrace something and want to do well in it, you really have to live it and embrace it. And with fashion, clothes were never my passion. Fashion was never a big deal for me. It was the creative journey with the people it was the people. And I realized that this photographer I had a great connection with, and we did fabulous things together. But I had to do that with lots of different photographers. And it's a bit like being in a salon. You can't just say, I'm only going to work with one client every 6 weeks, and I don't want to know about anybody else. It doesn't work that way. And I realized that although I was doing these amazing things, British Vogue front cover yes, if you'd have asked me when I was 18, do you want to do the front cover? Of course, I would have said yes. Was it on my tick list at the time? No. Once I started working in fashion, I never thought I'd work in fashion, but once I started to, it was almost like the energy that I was putting out there was leading me that way. And then, of course, the opportunity came. I took it. But after that had happened, my mum got sick, and I took some time out. And I then got confused. And I thought, you've got a choice here. Do you follow the path of your head and the ego and fulfilling these things, or do you go with your heart and go to what really, where you're from? It's people, and it's hairdressers. Yes, I like to achieve these other things, but in my heart and in my soul, it's where I'm from. So that's when I decided to come back into hair.
Wow. Gianni, I want to bring up a couple of questions so I don't miss them. And here's one from Debbie, actually, who is saying, you're absolutely right about evolving people. Do you think some hairdressers are not confident to cut shorter hair? Going back to the Fanny and Matt's question regarding the long hair syndrome.
Well, hi Debbie, lovely to speak to you over the chat. It's a really good point, actually, and I would say there are. I would agree with it, but I think it's not just shorter hair. I think everybody has gaps in their knowledge. I have them, and I think everybody has them, and they can create insecurities. We were talking earlier, Daniel, about all the gear, no idea. That's me anyway. And this. Well, we'll talk maybe a bit that in a moment. But I've confronted fears while we've been off. With regards to technology, and not that I fear technology, but just the fact that I get overwhelmed by how much goes into it. So I decided to sit down and face it while I had the time. And I think it's the same for hair. So going back to Debbie's question, yes, I think a lot of people, especially now. What concerns me is, you see, look, 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be a session hairdresser. They wanted to style hair and work backstage at fashion shows. 5 years ago, everyone decided they wanted to color hair and be a colorist. I'm being very generic here. And haircutting became the poor relation. It was king for years, and it became the poor relation. But what's happened is that things go in cycles, and haircutting is about to become the king of the hill. And with all respect to styling and color, because it's so important, there's no more important, but everything is important. But styling is temporary, and so is color. You can change color sometimes, but cutting, once it's gone for a certain amount of time. And so I think there's a generation that's been born and raised into styling and color, which is great, but they've lacked some skills in cutting. And, you know, or maybe there are people around that haven't had necessarily the most solid training at the beginning. And, you know, that creates a problem. So short hair can be quite daunting. So I would agree with Debbie that, yes, is the short answer. I think there are. And that's why I think doing something together where we're bringing on a course, and we can talk more about that. I know we've been paused by COVID at the moment, but we will come through this. We've dealt with viruses before in history, and we've come through them, and we'll do the same again. But it's really my role is to make sure that, you know, we have a great set of people who feel confident in being able to tackle anything that comes into the salon, you know.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I think a lot of people that's on this webinar, and some that are on here but was not aware, we were going to have an inspiration day with you, a full day inspiration day, which I let you share what happens on that day. Of course, because of this pause, it's been postponed. We don't have a new date, but we were speaking prior to this webinar, and as soon as it's safe and allowed and all of those things that we need to tick before we do it, we will have inspiration day with Gianni as soon as we can schedule it and follow all the guidelines needed. But why don't you share with us just briefly what happens on Inspiration Days for those people that had no clue what Inspiration Day with Gianni Scimaci is? Give us a brief summary of what to expect.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it when it happens, and eventually we'll get there.
It will indeed, yeah.
It's essentially a day with me, you know, sort of watching me go through my creative process. So that involves me talking and presenting visuals, and going through exactly how I discover, create, and evolve into the, you know, and giving really strong, solid examples. I mean, we've just touched on it briefly on this. This is not really the same thing at all, but this, you know, that's been really into the depth of my creative process and how that translates to real time and real people, not just in the glamorous sort of photo shoot world. And then backed up by, we sort of do that through the morning period, and we do a Q&A, a live Q&A, and then then we have lunch, and then in the afternoon we'll bring on some live models, and I will be doing some live demonstrations and going through some techniques for people to see some of the finished looks and the techniques that they can take away from that as well.
Excellent. And we, of course, Passion for Hair will share all the information once we are ready to do this, when we have dates, etc. And everyone that's already been booked on that event will, of course, have their places for the next one. Gianni, I've got a couple of more questions for you here. So here's one from Charlotte. She's saying, or asking even, what advice can you give for a stylist starting their creative journey with big dreams and career goals also? What would be your advice?
What my advice? I think, was that from Charlotte, did you say?
Yeah, Charlotte is asking the advice for a stylist starting their creative journey and they have big dreams and career goals.
Okay. Hi, Charlotte. Thank you so much for that message and that question. My advice, if you're starting out and you've got strong dreams, is number one, take your time. Don't be in a rush. I think when you look at the journey I had, it may look like I had it very young, but you have to remember I started very young. I started cutting hair at 10. Most people start cutting hair maybe 8 years later, 6, 7, 8 years later. And I would, don't be in a rush, because it's not the end that's the success. It's the journey. Now, it's a very cliche thing to say, but it's what you pick up on the way that is actually the goal. The end result happens because it's who you've become, not because of what you've received. You know, you become, if you get something too quickly, it doesn't really hold value. So that's the first thing. So don't be in a rush. Number two is find out what kind of hairdresser you want to be. There are so many different types of hairdressers. And then when you've decided which one you want to be, go and find the best person, the very best person in the world. If you've got big dreams and big ambitions, you'll travel, you go to the best person in the world and you go and assist them and you stick to them like glue and don't take no for an answer. And that's the advice I would give.
Oh, great advice. And the questions are flying in here, Gianni. I got a great question.
Yeah, loads, don't mind.
Got a great question here from Naomi. She's asking this. We are led or misled by a generation of wanting a reputation that's built on social media platforms. How would you advise apprentices today to stay focused on their dream and not to succumb to chasing followers or likes? What a great question, Naomi.
Brilliant. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you for that question. I think this comes down to generations. And I would like to answer the question by giving you a story that happened to me personally. So first of all, the new generation, it's not their fault. I don't know the generation Naomi is, but just to give it, if we're talking about generation, you've got X, Y, Z. But if we're talking about a youngster, really newbie, I think, first of all, there's been a huge divide between I'm just being very generic here, an older generation sort of blame the younger generation for being that way. And that's the first issue, because it's not their fault. Doesn't mean to say it's not happening. It is, and it's an issue, but it isn't their fault. Then what happens is that the divide between expectation is completely separated. And so it's how one bridges that divide. Now, I think personally, it's the responsibility of the older generation, as in like me, I'm an older generation, I'm not an apprentice, like we would in anything, to guide them in the correct way. And if it was a problem with the hair, it would be a senior person helping with hair. This is a problem with an outlook in life. Now, that's a large responsibility for a senior salon owner or stylist to take on, because you're dealing with more than a skill, you're dealing with a whole, outlook on life. But I'll give you an example of what happened to me. I was in the salon, I was fully booked, I'm always running behind, I was stressed. And I had a regular client who was in, and I was late. And I went downstairs and everyone was busy, and I saw an assistant who was in the tinting cupboard. And I went to this assistant and I said, would you be able to shampoo for me? And she said to me, can I get back to you on that? So at that point, I looked at her and I said, absolutely. If you could make it a couple of minutes, I'd be really grateful. And she came out and she said she could eventually, after about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, she could do it. But it was very much, she was put out. So I went upstairs, took her to my client, introduced her, and she shampooed. I could see that the shampoo wasn't being done with care. And when I got to my client kind of confirmed that, and I apologized to my client. And the client, had said that it wasn't a great experience in terms of the conditioner. The massage wasn't very good, but she was polite. That was it. Luckily, I knew the client very well, so we could have this conversation. And I left it. And this was 10 o'clock in the morning. It got to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30. And I went into the staff room, and there was the assistant, and there was a lot of staff. And I said, I'd just like to say thank you for looking after my client this morning. I haven't had a chance to speak to you yet. I said I was really stressed and quite, up the wall, and you really, really helped me out. And by the way, this is a £5 note from a tip from the client. And she said, thank you so much. Now, the client didn't leave her a tip. That was mine. But I gave her it. And I said to her, I gave her the money, and I said, thank you so much for doing that. She was really grateful. I said, what I would suggest though, I said, is the next time you do the massage, I said, if you can spend a little bit more time, you might find you'll get an even better response from the client. But I said, I'm really grateful. And I said, Thank you. Thanks again. The next time I needed a shampoo doing, she was there. Now, it wasn't the money, funny enough. It was the fact that I'd given her the public recognition in the staff room. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's how I could have gone off the handle when she said to me, can I get back to you? I could have gone mad. But we have to step further and connect. And then suddenly, once this girl now is very much, she will follow everything I say. And then I started talking about her training and how, and I think it's just that we have to probably take a step further to reach them. That's my advice. I know it's a bit of a long-winded story, but that was my experience. And I think we can't win everyone over, but it's about finding a way of connecting. And I think it's a lot of people need recognition. That's, you know, they get home on the Instagram. Look, you know, I get that feeling. You open your Instagram, you've made a post. Oh, goodness me, you know, how many people have liked it? You know, really, it's about whether if you like it, that's important enough to post. But, you know, it feeds off a human. It's what reason why social media is so encompassing is because it feeds off human nature and that need for affirmation. So if we can give them affirmation in a sophisticated way, but there's a lesson that goes along with it, it's a bit like a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. I hope that answers your question.
I'm sure it does. I think that's a great answer, and to have the ability to give them the affirmation face to face, if you like, that connection, rather than being social media. It doesn't take away the social media, but I guess that what you're saying is leadership. We have to show them that we care, and we can show the way face to face rather than in a digital manner. I think is and it's a great story. You've got another question here from Carly. She's loving your story. And she's asking, what would your advice be for a stylist to do differently when returning to the salon after what's currently going on to help evolve our clients? So
ask the question again, sorry.
Sorry. Let me find it. I scrolled away from it. Pardon me. What would your advice for a stylist to do differently when we return to the salon to help evolve our clients?
Oh, that's a great question. Was that Carly, did you say?
That is Carly indeed.
Hi, Carly. Thank you for that. That's a fabulous question. Well, one thing I would say to hairdressers, and what I've done, is while we've had this time off, is think about your clients. You know, I wake up quite conscious about which clients are older, live on their own. I call them sometimes. I don't call everybody. I can't call everybody. I have rang out and reached a lot of clients. Not everybody is in a position they can do that, I know. But what I would do very much is, it's an opportunity for me. This is a huge opportunity to get deeper. And when they come in, you know, it comes to the social function of a hairdresser. I've always spoken about the social function of a hairdresser and how important the role we play in society. And we give far more than hair. We have always given, I mean, salons have been known for social reform, for historical, in history, you know, for sort of political refuge. Salon's a safe environment and always has been. And what we give it should be a lot more than hair. And this more than ever is a golden opportunity for when clients come back in to answer the question, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So I think we need to use them in that ratio and really listen deeper and get onto a deeper level. I mean, now we may not be able to talk because of the mask to begin with. That's a different discussion. But when we do get the opportunity to speak, it will be something, you're going to notice that there's going to be a lot more emotional engagement needed with clients. I've always seeked out emotional engagement with clients from day one. I've always wanted to go deeper. I'm not a shallow swimmer. I swim with the sharks in a bad way. I'm a lover of sharks, by the way. It's another passion of mine. But I go deep, you know, because I think there's a lot more fulfillment deep down. So my answer to the question is, I have an online, actually, funny enough, I have an online portal, which maybe we could leave I've just rebuilt my portal. I'm very excited about it. I've got new courses coming soon. And one of the things I've got on there is it's not a consultation, it's a connection philosophy. And I got videos step by step on how you connect, assess, and perceive someone before they even sit down in the chair. And then when they sat in the chair, so I have CAP and LIFE. CAP is connect, assess, and perceive. And there are tools and techniques of what you're listening, what you're looking for. You're reading someone. And then there is life, which is listen, identify, frame, and establish. And these are techniques I would highly recommend people to go and check out and try out. I have a guy called Rocky who he's been a student of mine. He lives in Berlin, and he's just gone back. He sent me a message at the weekend. He's doing clients, and he's trying this out. He did a one-to-one with me recently, and he's got it on. He's done the online course, and he's trying it out, and he says it's been very effective because it's been something that, you know, people are now not how's your holiday, and there's nothing wrong with asking how was your holiday, but it's not exactly the deepest question. It's going to go deeper. So I would say listen and listen deeper.
I'm really pleased you brought that up, because it leads us nicely on to our next question and really where we were taking this conversation. First of all, great answer. Let me ask you this. Would you say that this pause that we are currently in is a great opportunity for a salon owner, but also for a stylist, to hit the reset button and come back as a developed and more a different kind of stylist? You know, is the opportunity to reinvent yourself and truly become the stylist that you want to be after this pause? Is that something you would agree on?
I think that you either press the reset button or the regret button. And for me, it's about resetting. It is a golden opportunity for anybody who, this is not necessarily aimed at salon owners. I mean, salon owners, they've already got the responsibility that they have. They don't need me to tell them that. But if you're a stylist, doesn't matter how young or how experienced or less experienced you are, or even if you're an assistant, my advice would be, this time is absolutely golden, because you can go back, you can where you had gaps. You know, look, I was guilty as this. You know, I've come away from the work I do, and I look back now, I had time, and I can see where I didn't have time to improve myself. There were areas of my business and what I could do, not just business, but the way I am and the way I approach my work, which I didn't have time to do better. So I'm reinventing myself. I've invested my time into learning how to edit the marketing side of my business, but also who I am as a person. You know, am I giving the message I want to give, and how can I be? You know, I'm no different to anybody else, and how can I look after my clients better? You know, and I've really questioned it. And so this is a time to go through. What I would say is go through your journey, your customer journey. Think about first the practicality. We all don't know how it's going to be yet. You know, we have to wait. But ultimately, if we are going to go back, when we do, we are going to be, regardless of a mask, regardless of PPE and gloves and anything else, we are still having a human being in our chair, and we will connect. And you know something, I'm a huge believer, like COVID will not take away, it will take away a lot of things from our industry, but it can never take human spirit. The human spirit has not taken this away from us. I mean, this screen is not blocking the human spirit. And amazing, wonderful audience that are listening and asking these great questions and connecting with you, Daniel, and even Debbie the other day. You know, it doesn't remove the human spirit, and we need to harness that human spirit hugely. And we have the tools within us. You have to look within, and this time is space. If you lose money, you can get it back. If you lose your health and you're lucky, you can get it back. You lose time, no one's giving it back to you. So the time that we've been given, and I see this as been the most precious thing that could be given on a certain level. I know there's tragedy, but we don't need to focus on that because the news does it for us. So my advice would be, take stock about how you will look after that client, what conversation you will have, how does that work step by step. And even if you don't quite know whether you're allowed to do certain things, you can still go through the logistics and rehearse and script and think how you come across. And you come back and you will come back it's an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And that can only be stronger, because we can all improve all the time. And it's a golden opportunity.
Absolutely. Next question from Anna actually brings us really nicely into your next defining moments, and I actually think that her question might be answered. So just bear with us here, Anna, because let's move to this slide, Gianni. And Anna has a question here. She's asking. Oh, it disappeared. In short, she's asking, what's your new vision and your next goals? you are at this moment in time. I think this slide and what you are currently doing might actually answer that for her.
Yeah, was that from Anna, did you say?
Yeah, Anna asked that question. I'm just going to find it as you carry on, make sure I covered that. Yeah, so in short, she said, what are your new goals and your next steps?
Oh, thank you, Anna. That's a really good question. Well, actually, that does dovetail into this picture, Daniel. It's very smoothly done. So yeah, I mean, basically, I'll talk about the picture and then answer the questions. Probably the best way of doing this.
Please.
I was about to launch my education in 2016. I have the online portal, as I said, where I've got all my haircuts step by step, and I'd gone all out. I'd done it at the highest end. I had a huge film crew, major studio. I'd imported the most expensive mannequin heads from Japan. I went all out, and I'd filmed these haircuts, and this was going to be the launch of my education, not only online but in the world. And I had clients set up and the whole thing. I went on holiday with my wife, then girlfriend, to the Lake District, to a little cottage that I go to, and I was so stressed and overwhelmed, and I had to edit these videos, and it's a really long task to do this. And I thought I'd have a bit of a break and work on this in quiet up there. We had 2 days, and on the second, well, we had a week, but on the second day, I was in a car park, and a Range Rover didn't see me. It was his fault, and ran me over and crushed my left ankle and my left foot. And these are X-rays of what happened. So on the left, you can see all the nuts and bolts and screws and plates that I have now. And then on the right, you can see my foot. Now that's all those bones on the left that are all crushed. They should look as clean as further over. And what that means in reality is that I can't do lots of things that I may appear that I can to the naked eye, but I'm in. This is not a sympathy thing, by the way. People have a lot worse than this. I'm just giving you the reality of how it affected me. It basically stopped me working for 11 months. So right on the eve of me launching my education, I'm self-employed. I was wiped out. I didn't know if I could work again. If you look on the left, very interestingly, at the bottom of the plates which hold the screws, you'll see that you'll see where the ankle meets the foot, and that was millimeter away from where there is a break. If that had gone through to the edge, I would have not been able to bend my ankle ever again. Yes, just there, exactly. And I know you're a sportsman, so you probably know this yourself, Daniel. But basically, I was a millimeter away from basically not being able to move my ankle at all, and that, seriously affecting me. And I didn't know at the time whether it was going to go through and the fracture was going to go all the way towards the end. So it was a very daunting time. I was 11 months out. My girlfriend, then wife now, nursed me from day one. I mean, I would never have got through it without her. Let's just put that straight on the table. But what it did was mentally, can you imagine? I'm on the bed and I can't move, and I'm on all the drugs and everything else. And basically, I went back to my thing is, if you can look up, you can get up. And I was on my back, thankfully. And I remember Bruce Lee, because he was a huge idol of mine. He was about to make it big in Hollywood, and he broke his back, and he was on his back, and he couldn't. He lost the contract. He was his dream, and he used his mind to rebuild himself because he couldn't use his body. And so I thought, I'm going to have to do that. So when I came off the drugs, the painkillers, after a couple of months, I got my computer and I decided to start editing from the bed. Thank God I had the footage, my own haircuts. And I taught myself, and I'm not exaggerating, and it's quite a vulnerable thing to admit, I actually taught myself how to cut hair again, because if you don't cut hair for 11 months, no matter what your experience, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I had to harness what, can only make the best of what you have around you. Same with COVID. I'm in my studio. I have a little studio. I don't know if you can see. I've got a little studio here with a backdrop. It's a very small. I've got my bicycle there to keep fit, and there's some lights you can see there. But I've turned this into a photographic studio, and I'm going to be filming my own next round of videos in here the next week. And I'm teaching myself how to edit, because I can't edit professionally, and so you have to make the most of what you have. And hairdressers are so resourceful. we do that daily. But going back to the question about what will I do next, so this took me on a different journey, because I couldn't stand behind a chair. I can't stand behind a chair 5 days a week now. I don't have that capacity. So if you notice when I'm teaching or I'm on stage, you'll see me walking around probably like I need to go for a wee, but it's not. It's just that I can't stand still too long because my ankle swells. But I don't feel down about that. I see it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to say, right, teaching is going to be part of what I do, because I don't have the choice of being in the salon as much as I love it. And I'm going to be the best person I can be with this, because this is part of who I am, and it makes me unique, because there's not many people who have got that particular break in that particular place. And so that makes me unique. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I could get up and walk, and I have people that love me and surrounded me and got me through it. And that is an amazing thing to have in your life. And so it really made me become much more grateful for what I have, not what I don't have. And it was challenging going back to the salon when I could only do 2 clients a day for 2 days, and looking at regular clients next to me who I hadn't picked to do their hair. It was very awkward. But it made me think, right, I have no choice. Now I have to go and do so. My future plans will be to continue behind the chair doing clients like I do, but part-time, and to pursue my message, my teaching, but use my teaching as a platform to bring on hairdressers and help encourage them to become better at what they do.
Fantastic. What a great story to answer the question. And as you mentioned earlier, as we had this conversation, how it's important how you act and behave and how you respond when you have some tough times. So you certainly did that. Looking at this image, it looks like a nasty break. Actually, I'm not envious of you. Yeah,
it's a break on the left and a crush on the right. It's the crush that's the hardest thing, because the foot doesn't sort of bend that well. But it's for me, it's how I've dealt with COVID. Is being off for this amount of time is actually, apart from the tragedy and the fact that we're in this world situation, that's a different discussion, but just physically being off, it's a walk in the park versus 11 months off. I've been trained for it. I've never been as strong as I am now, and I'm quite enjoying the time off, because I'm doing the things that I would never be able to do, and I'm really trying to I want to come out of this with something to show for it, and I want to come back stronger. I want to come back a different Gianni, I want to offer people different things, hence a new portal. And I saw someone just pointed out, how do they learn more about Cap and Life? I think that was Darren. Hi, Darren. I want to add to that, and that's on my portal, which is if you go onto my Instagram page, which is at Gianni Scimaci, and you click on there's a link in the bio, that will take you straight into my portal, my new portal. So my link in my bio in Instagram, and if you had to type it would be courses.gianniscimaci.com. It's quite easy to remember. And you can learn more. But I want to add to that portal, and I want to add a new volume, so I can look back and it's not the COVID collection, but it kind of is. I mean, my last collection was with not a Hollywood film crew, but pretty much it was major. And now I'm in my little studio in my garden, but it's not going to stop me. I am still going to do it. So I really, and I will. And you make the best of what you have, and it's not what you've got; it's what you do with what you've got.
Oh, I love your attitude, and I couldn't agree with you more. And actually, it ties very nicely into the next question from Matt. Matt is back with a second question. He's asking, what is your prediction for the next popular trend?
That's a great question. Thank you, Matt.
In terms of haircuts, I'm sure he means. In terms of haircuts.
I'm just going to turn my back. I've realised my plug wasn't on, so just before we die, I'm just going to turn the plug on a second.
Oh, yeah, please.
There we go. Sorry. I'm sure my plug was charging and I just saw it wasn't. So that was from Matt.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. My computer doesn't fall back down. So, prediction for trends in the future. I'm not a great... Well, let me put it this way. I think trends are important for commerce, business, but I'm not a believer in trends. I never have been, and I probably never will be, because I believe that we all are so unique that if we're evolved and tapped into, we're going to be very different. But if there are going to be, trends will come from this. I think it's difficult to say right now how fashion will respond. They usually reflect the times we're in. But I don't know yet. I think it's too early to suggest how commercial trends will come. I do believe in one thing. I do think that if hairdressers can get it right with their connection with their clients, when it comes to hair trends, we will dictate that it's about the individual. It always has been. But I think this time that we've had and what we're going through right now is making people reprioritize their values and how important health is and how important they are. I mean, how many women and men are walking around with lots of grey roots and long hair grown out, but all that's ever going to do, and I've said this from the beginning before COVID, that the equity of our social function will only ever get more. But we as hairdressers have to believe and see that ourselves. And now more than ever in history, and that's not a sweeping statement, it's truth and fact, is a time to recognize that, because our social function will grow, and it will be, going back to the trends, people will want to be who they are. I think they're going to find themselves more.
Excellent. And Matt has a follow-up question here, and I think I know the answer to this one to a degree. Matt is asking, when you create a haircut from scratch, what advice can you give bringing a new design to market so that you can use it in the salon or on a shoot? How is it done? Would you say it's similar to a singer writing a new song?
Oh, that's a great question. Who was that from?
It's from Matt again. So
that's from Matt again.
Question. Yeah, he's on fire this morning.
Matt's
he's tuned in. Yeah.
Everybody knows that when I hold courses, if they've been on a course with me, that the first 3 tips and tricks are free, and then I charge extra.
I was just going to say, would it be fair to say that your inspiration day is part of that step to learn your creative process and how to put that in place? Yeah, that would probably be the first step to do it.
The answer to that question is spot on. That's exactly what it would be. I take the audience through my journey of how I've created, through discover, create, and evolve, and I get right into the nuts and bolts of it. But in short, just to answer Matt's question, I don't stand in my studio, which is where I'm in here, with a mannequin head and start taking equation of sections and thinking, if I do this and do that, what will happen? I tend to work from an emotional perspective, not a technical perspective. So I will listen to things that will get me emotionally engaged, like a piece of music, film score, or something that gets me emotional. And usually music, because it's quite evocative. And I'll just play and just put hair where I feel it needs. I just be guided. It's, and then I'll see something, but I've taken myself out of being this expert or professional or experienced haircutter, and I put myself back into my 7-8-year-old body. I want to be the student, and I play. You see, I believe we're all born artists. The challenge is to remain one.
Oh, I love that.
And for me, I have to get in touch with my emotional side and my childlike side, and play. And I'll see, and you've got to be aware of the mistake, because the mistake is where the magic happens. I work with David Bailey, the great photographer, the most iconic photographer that probably ever was. And he's still with us, thankfully. But he always taught me that he works on film, not digital, because the problem with digital photography is you stop once you've got it, and you never find the magic which it could have been. And that's where I'm working with ideas with hair. I try things and I wait for the mistake. I wait for it, because that's where the magic happens. So it's a difficult question to answer shortly, in a short block of time, but it's very much done on emotional things. With a real person, I get inspired by the person in front of me. And that's the truth. Like I did with Fanny that you saw. You know, with Fanny's hair, I was queuing up in, this is where it really happened. I was queuing up in a supermarket for some food at lunchtime, and I saw a little 3-year-old boy with, you know, when baby's hair doesn't grow properly and it's got patches. And I looked at, he was over his mum's shoulder. And I thought that would be so cool on the right person. And when Fanny walked in, she was it. And that's why it was done. Patches of shaved bits away.
I love that story. Fantastic. So, Gianni, you've been super generous with your time. I'm not going to let you go just yet. We do have quite a lot of questions, and I just figured if I don't take control and give you these questions, we can probably sit here all day listening to you. But if you would allow me to fire some questions at you, and we've got one here from Emma asking, what is the single best advice Vidal Sassoon gave you? It's probably hard to answer in one short statement, but if you had to pick...
I think it wasn't so much. He said to me very quickly, when he was not well, I went to his house in America, in Hollywood, and we sat down with a bottle of wine. He opened a bottle of wine for me, and he admitted he wasn't very well, and it was very serious, and the public didn't know. And having gone through this with my mum, I remember saying to him, you know, there is hope. That's the word to focus on. And he said to me, there's another word, will. The will. And that's always stuck with me.
Beautiful. Yeah. And a follow-up question there from Richard Tidy. He's asking, can you remember if it was white wine or red wine?
Hi, Richard. Great to hear from you. It was red wine. It was actually Barolo. He opened it for me because it was Italian.
That's beautiful. Let me see where we are at with the questions. So, Matt is back with a question. This is a great question. After getting to know you, and just to remind you, you have met Matt at the Passion for Hair event.
Yes.
He's saying it's hard to believe you get stressed. Can you share some examples of what gets you stressed and how you deal with it, how you manage them?
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I get stressed. I think I was always brought up that when you're on the salon floor, you're on stage, and your job is to always, no matter what's going on behind the scenes, you know, the client isn't there for that. And it's their time to show their feet like the swan, but not yours. You know, you stay remarkably professional. And when I'm under intense pressure, I usually work best when I'm under the most pressure. I do stay calm on the outside, but, you know, there's a price to pay afterwards or before, you know, on the inside. So what I try to do is I tend to... I do exercise. I do try to exercise now more than I've ever done because of my physio. And I tend to channel the stress in a different way. But I do get stressed. So if I answer the question, because I'm not sure if I've completely covered that, but I do get stressed. But I think that when I'm back, people do say when they do shows with me, I'm very calm, because for me, I have to set the tone. You know, when the boss, here's one for you, because this is what I live by. When the boss sneezes, the team get a cold.
Great. I love that saying.
We'll be sending invoices in the post here.
Absolutely. Here's a question from Sophia. I think you sort of answered it, but I think it's worth reinforcing. She's asking what's the next for you on your journey, and I guess it's your online education portal that you are working very hard on. I suppose that is the sort of next evolution of Gianni to get that improved.
I was going to say thanks, Daniel. What I'm doing is we will eventually. I am holding. People who follow me will see it. I've been holding online webinars as well, but they're private webinars that I'm doing. I'm still setting it all up. I've been giving away a lot of videos from my portal for people. I'm going to be doing another keep an eye out for everyone, but I'll be doing that again, I think, very soon. But I wanted to support hairdressers in the best way I can. And so for me, it was I had the portal, so I wanted to be able to do sort of like, sort of 72 hour giveaways for people to be able to follow things. But the webinars will be something of a slightly different nature. But moving forward, I'll be doing that as well as, because we're going through different phases. So who knows? I'm not got a crystal ball, so I've set myself up so eventually, at a reasonable situation for people to be able to do, I'll start to hold webinars as well. But that's something for the future, I think.
Excellent. And for all of you guys, hopefully by now, I don't know if you're watching this on your phone or on your laptop or on your tablets, but certainly worth following Gianni on all of his social media, on all the platforms, if you're not already. Some great stuff going on there. And just to reinforce, Passion for Hair's relationship with Gianni and the courses that we had planned, they've just been postponed. It's a pause. We will have them, and there will be availability to have those as soon as we get the clearance, so to speak. So I encourage everyone to, one, follow Gianni, put some amazing work out there, and two, keep an eye out for his online platform, but also the events we're going to do with Passion for Hair. And I'm going to make this the last question, Gianni. Again, you've been super generous with your time, but I've got a question from Darren, and he is asking, you mentioned Vidal Sassoon teaching you lots, and I think you mentioned about how he taught you to handle people. What did you learn about being in the salon? What a great question.
So is that what I learned from being in the salon? Is that?
Well, that's how I read it. Yeah. So we covered a lot of the influence from Vidal in terms of shows, etc. And I think Darren's question is fantastic. Being in the salon, I guess that could be open to both as a young hairdresser and.
I think I learned. Thanks, Darren, for the question. It's a very good one. I learned how to be in life in the salon. I grew up in the salon. I was surrounded by older people from a very young age. And one thing you learn from, I've always surrounded myself with older people, always, because I can learn. They've always got more experience, so that I can learn from them. And I learned how to be empathetic. I mean, it's probably part of my character, but empathy was a huge part of the salon. Watching my dad and how he was with clients and how he tailored his conversations to the individuals, making clients feel special, really special, and that taught me how to handle people in life. I guess if I'm really honest, I had more experience in the salon with salon clients at a certain point than I did in life. So by the time I got to have to handle life, I just used the techniques I've learned in the salon, which were, as I say, empathy, making people feel special, care, wanting people to feel better about themselves, and that's what I learned from the salon. That is an apprenticeship you'll get nowhere. You won't get that backstage at a fashion show. You will not get that backstage on a shoot, and you'll definitely not get that with a celebrity. Salon is where it's at. Salon is the most fertile, valuable, enriching, loving and caring environment that anyone could grow up in to begin their journey in this world, in this profession. And obviously some salons do it better than others, some aren't so good, but as a general rule, salons have taught me a lot about how to handle people. When I was at school at 16, I could handle the bullies because I would work out how to read people, because from the age of 12 I was the Saturday boy washing people's hair, and so it taught me a lot. So it's a really great question from Darren.
It's an excellent question. So Gianni, again, I'm sure if we leave it any longer, we would have a ton of new questions. But I want to say thank you. I know, Debbie, we've had such a inspiring moment since we met you for the very first time in London to have a conversation, and all the other connection points we've had up to now. You're truly inspirational. I think you are such a kind and humble person, and your story and your vision for hairdressers is truly remarkable, and we really appreciate everything that you do. And the time you've taken this morning to spend time with this audience is fantastic. We really appreciate you, and hopefully in the not so distant future, we will be having our Inspiration Day and getting the workshops up and running again. So is there anything you wish to leave the audience with before we part ways?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. And it's been, from meeting you and Debbie from the beginning and knowing the Passion Fair family, and especially teaching as I did back in February with the group, and obviously at Business Counts before that, it's been fantastic. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. Well, one thing I would say to the audience, if everybody has enjoyed it, if they want, what I can do to help people's social media is if they want to take a screenshot of this and post it on their Instagram stories, I will repost it. So, if anyone's interested in doing that, I'll be happy to repost. And, it's sometimes when we're doing things like this, it's nice to bring awareness as well to other people's accounts. I think I'm on about 35 now. I've been trying to grow mine slowly, but hopefully if I can help someone, put them in the spotlight, and it'd be great. So that's one thing. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and tuning in, and thank you for asking me to do it. It's been a pleasure, and please send my love to Debbie when you speak to her.
I will indeed. So
I'm just to say as well, I'm very excited when we can eventually roll out the full foundation course that we had planned, and we will. It will take time.
We absolutely will, and
we will. And I was so excited this year, and I am still more excited about the collaboration with Passion for Hair. It really feels fantastically a hand in glove situation to me. So I'm looking forward to it.
It couldn't be a better marriage, so to speak, what we have planned with you moving forward. As you said, it's just on pause. So for the rest of you guys, again, thank you for joining us today. And don't forget that this Wednesday we have at 3:30 p.m. Debbie with Brittany Newby. So if you remember, she opened her salon in Edmonton last week on Wednesday. And we're going to have a look at what that looks like 1 week on, and how in particular she is handling the 8 essential steps with her clients. So it's this coming Wednesday at 3:30. So Gianni, thank you again, and spend time with your family, and work on your online portal, and we shall speak to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Lovely to speak to you, Daniel.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank Declan as well.
Yes, thank Declan. He's been fantastic. Yeah, he always is. Thank you, Gianni.
Bye-bye. Thank you.